Welcome to another episode of Cerebral Faith Live. I'm Evan Minton. This is Genesis 9. This is a series on the primeval history of the Bible. We've been going through each chapter of the Bible and spending a good amount of time exegeting its content and learning what it means in its original ancient Near Eastern context and what we can learn from these passages of the Bible. We started out with Genesis 1, Genesis 2, and then Genesis 3, 4, 5, 6. And last week, we finished covering the flood narratives, whether the flood is historical or is just a plagiarized myth from things like Gilgamesh and the Epic of Atrahasis, and whether the flood was local or global. Now, if you haven't been able to attend past live streams, all of the past live streams can be played on playback here on the YouTube channel. Just go to the Cerebral Faith YouTube channel and you'll find all of the videos still there from the first one up until the present one. You should do that because I'm putting out a lot of good content on this that doesn't get, some of which doesn't get talked about a lot in church, only in academic circles. Today we're going to be moving on to Genesis 9, and we're going to be talking about several things. Let me share my screen so I can bring up the presentation. Oh, and by the way, if I go blank, there's a thunderstorm right now, so if I go out, that's going to be unfortunate. If so, I'll just redo the presentation tomorrow. But hopefully I don't lose power. But if I go out, if the screen just goes blank, you'll know why. And if that does happen, then just come back tomorrow. But hopefully that won't happen. Hopefully the power will stay on. You might be able to hear the rain. Anyway, Genesis 9. The Noahic covenant and the curse of Canaan. So Genesis 9 contains, it really can be divided up into two halves. The Noahic covenant, Noah gets off the ark and God sets up a covenant with Noah. Noah offers a sacrifice. And then the second half is this weird story about Noah getting drunk and he passes out. And Noah ends up cursing his grandson Canaan. And that's really weird. And for most of my Christian life, when I read this narrative, I just didn't know what to make of it. But I have, through my biblical studies, I have come to a satisfying answer that it makes the account not as bizarre as it might seem at first. So those are the two halves here, the half number 1, the Noahic covenant, and half number 2, the drunken, passed out, naked Noah cursing Canaan. And there's going to be several elements in this first one that we're going to be examining. So let's read the passage first. Genesis chapter 9. Quote, "Then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, 'Be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you will fall on all the beasts of the earth, and on all the birds of the sky, on every creature that moves along the ground, and on all the fish in the sea. They are given into your hands. Everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. But you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it. And for your lifeblood I will surely demand an accounting. I will demand an accounting from every animal, and from each human being too. I will demand an accounting for the life of another human being. Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed. For in the image of God has God made mankind. As for you, be fruitful and increase in number, multiply on the earth and increase upon it.' Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, 'I now establish my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all those that came out of the ark with you. every living creature on earth, I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a I read that wrong. Become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth. So God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant I have established between me and all life on the earth. End quote. That's Genesis chapter 9, verses 1 to 17. This is the Noahic covenant part. So, oops, there was no transition on that one. So there are at least three questions that this passage raises. The first question is, did rainbows exist before the flood? Secondly, the second question is, was this the first time humans were permitted to eat meat? The third question is, if God is omniscient, why would he need a rainbow as a reminder? So, did rainbows exist before this event? Some creationists, young Earth creationists, will say no, there were no rainbows before this. From the article, was there no rain before the flood on BibleStudy.org? This article says, quote, the scripture that mentions no rain before the great flood is found in Genesis 2. It states, when the Lord God made the universe, there were no plants on the earth and no seeds had sprouted because he had not sent any rain, but water would come up from beneath the surface and water the ground. Genesis chapter 2, verses 5 to 6. According to some, this condition of no rain only lasted until shortly after the creation events mentioned in Genesis 1. If this is true, then this fog and mist began the hydraulic cycle, which eventually led to water falling from the sky. On the other hand, there are other factors to consider that lead one to believe that there were no showers before Noah's flood. The timing of the formation of rainbows offers evidence that it did not rain on the earth until after the deluge, end quote. So this author at least leans towards there being no rain before the flood. And I think, if I remember correctly, when I read the whole thing, I think he actually does not, he actually affirms that there was no rain at all before the flood. And I've heard some other Christians make this statement. There was no rain before the Noahic flood, and there were no rainbows before this. This was the first rainbow in history, and when it rained, when Noah got on the ark, that was the first time it ever rained in the history of our planet. Now there are a couple of problems with this view. The verse that this author appealed to, Genesis chapter 2, verses 5 to 6, when the Lord God made the universe, there were no plants on the earth, and no seeds had sprouted because he had not sent any rain, but water would come up from beneath the surface and water the ground. The first problem is that Genesis 2 is Eden-centric. It's not focused on the whole planet Earth. You can see that when you look at the passage in its context. It's focused, Genesis 2 is zeroed in on everything that's happening in the Garden of Eden. Adam is formed, he names the animals, Eve is formed, they have communion with God in the garden, and it's not focused on, you just read the chapter. Just read Genesis 2, and you see that it's not focused on the entire planet. It's just focused on what's happening in the Garden of Eden. So it very well may be true that there was no rain in the Garden of Eden because there were no plants and no seeds, and the reason for that is because there weren't any people around in Eden to do the work of cultivating the plants, doing farm work, doing garden work. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't rain anywhere else on the planet, and certainly not until the flood in Genesis 6, 7, and 8. The second problem is that the idea that the earth could survive without rain for 1,556 years is absurd. Now, where did I get that number, 1,656? That number is that's taking the young earthers' own strict counting of the genealogies, and from the time of Adam to the time of Noah, not taking them as symbolic, like I covered in the Genesis 5 video, in which I argued that these extremely long ages are not symbolic, but are not literal, but they're symbolic, and they convey certain numerological messages. Just taking the genealogy strictly literally, and doing the Bishop Usher method, that's the time period that you get. It was about it was 1,656 years. Even by that somewhat short counting, if there were no rain at all until the flood mentioned in Genesis 6, 7, and 8, there would be no life. That would be a life-ending drought for the entire planet to have no rain anywhere for nearly 2,000 years. That's a life-ending drought. I mean, the planet would be like Mars. There had to be rain before the days of Noah. So now, while I said that some young Earth creationists hold this, not many do, and I would say probably not even most do. I mean, I not anymore. I mean, it may have been more prominent at some point in the past, but most young Earth creationists don't buy into this idea that there was no rain before the flood, but some do, and so that's why I brought it up. Just in case anybody who holds that view or believes that watches this video, they'll know why that's not a tenable position. Now, here I've got a quotation from Jonathan Sarfati. I gotta be careful when I read his last name, because it's not easy to say. Jonathan Sarfati, and this quote is from the article "Rainbows, the Flood, and the Covenant" from creation.com. He writes, quote, "The Noahic covenant was certainly the first mention of the rainbow, but the Bible is silent on whether they had previously occurred. However, there are some considerations that suggest there have been rainbows, which will be addressed in turn. The science of the rainbow, the natural laws that operated before and after the flood, and God's sovereign authority to ordain meanings and phenomena," end quote. And Ken Ham, in the article, "Were There Rainbows Before the Flood?" he writes this, quote, "A short opinion piece in the religion column of a newspaper in Walla Walla, Washington, was recently brought to my attention. This article by Mark Coons of Emmanuel Lutheran Church claims some well-meaning interpreters distort the message of Genesis. But in reality, what Coons does is distort what AIG teaches. He claims I insist that Genesis 9 teaches there were no atmospheric conditions that could produce the visual appearance of a rainbow before Noah's flood. In short, this was the very first human sighting of a rainbow ever. I would like him to show where I have even suggested that, let alone insist it's true," end quote. So Ken Ham denies that, there were rainbows. Not even this popular young Earth creationist holds this idea. Now back to Jonathan Sarfati's article, Rainbows, the Flood, and the Covenant from creation.com. He writes, quote, rainbows are the result of well-known physics. When light enters at an angle into a substance where it travels more slowly, like a prism, different wavelengths are bent differently. This effect is called dispersion. Since color depends on wavelength, we see this as a band of different colors. The shorter wavelengths, black, violet, and blue, are bent the most. The longer wavelengths, red and orange, are bent the least. The great creationist physicist Sir Isaac Newton experimented on dispersion by glass prisms. His experiments demonstrated that color is a property of the light itself. Colored objects don't generate color, they absorb or reflect light that is already colored. Actually, the dispersion is continuous. We see colored bands because of the designs of our color vision. Newton designated 7 colors to the rainbow by analogy to the 7 notes of the musical scale: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Hence the mnemonic initialism ROYGBIV. But there are different designations and numbers of color. For example, I don't see indigo, but sometimes see a small band of blue-green, also called aqua, cyan, or turquoise. Actually, the difference might be with the names we give color, one author suggests, end quote. Now, some have argued that this had to be the first rainbow because God used it as a covenant sign. So it was special. So there couldn't have been rainbows before this event. Otherwise, it wouldn't be special. However, God doesn't require something to be new in order to use it as a covenant symbol. Ancient Near Eastern evidence shows that circumcision was practiced prior to God's covenant with Abraham. Genesis chapter 12, verses 13 to 14. And obviously, bread and wine existed prior to Passover, Exodus 12:14, and the Eucharist, Matthew 26:16. Bread and wine existed before the Passover and the Eucharist, and yet God used bread and wine as a sign for of the Passover initially, and then thousands of years later, and as symbolic of the body and blood of Christ being sacrificed on the cross for the sins of mankind. So God does not require that there be no rainbows ever in order prior to the events recorded in Genesis 9 in order to use it as a covenant symbol. Because he didn't use, he obviously other things existed, and God used those as covenant symbol signs. Now, the issue of meat. Was this the first time God permitted humans to eat meat? A lot of Christians will say yes, and they will point to the parallel wording of Genesis 9, verses 1 to 5, and Genesis 1, verses 29 to 30. Genesis chapter 1, verses 29 to 30 says, quote, and God said, behold, I give to you every seed-bearing plant that is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree of which is in it the fruit of a tree bearing seed. To you it shall be for food, and to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds of the sky, and all the creeping things upon the earth, which is in them the breath of life, are all green plants for food. And it was so, end quote. Genesis chapter 9, verses 1 to 5 says, quote, and God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, all moving which lives will be to you for food. Like a green plant, I give to you everything. Only meat of which blood is in it you may not eat. And for your own lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From the hand of every beast I will require it. I will require it from the hand of every beast and from the hand of a man, end quote. Ben Stanhope writes that, quote, the parallel language here to the previous passage we examined is undeniable, so it is sometimes argued that this passage marks the first time in history that God gave humanity permission to start eating animals. Proponents of this interpretation understand God to be saying, all moving which lives will be to you for food. Like I previously granted you the right to eat a green plant, I now give to you everything. However, a significant problem with this interpretation is that the gap of chapters between the opening creation account and this passage implies that man was already eating meat at God's pleasure. Three texts evidencing this follows. 1. Genesis 3:21 has God himself making Adam and Eve leather clothes. Theologians like to imagine this leather was a byproduct of God dramatically initiating the first animal sacrifice in history, but the text never actually mentions a sacrifice. The author is only interested in specifying the purpose for providing clothing. The fact that God has no objection in this passage to using the flesh of a dead animal to supply for one of humanity's physical needs seems to lend evidence that this prerogative would have also extended to physical needs like consumption. 2. In Genesis 4:2, we are told that Abel was a keeper of flocks, and in 4:4, he is depicted bringing the fat of the firstborn of his livestock to God as a pleasing offering to the Lord. What, did Abel go to all that trouble of keeping flocks so he could butcher the animals, cut away the fat off the inner flesh, and then throw the meat away to rot in a field? His paralleled brother Cain tilled the soil to produce crops that the family could subsist on, but Abel spent an enormous amount of time and resources raising flocks that he couldn't eat. The fact that Abel went through the work of separating fat portions from the rest of his livestock kill, as opposed to simply sacrificing the entire animal, evinces that the rest of the kill was used for consumption, as was standard in sacrificial practice elsewhere. 3. In Genesis 7:2, God tells Noah to gather 7 pairs of all clean animals and a single pair of unclean animals onto the ark. God's command for Noah to sort the animals according to what is usually dietary would imply animals were eaten before the flood. Given this evidence that humanity was consuming meat after the fall, why does Genesis chapter 9 verses 1 to 5 seem to go out of the way to declare man's right to eat meat after the flood? Isn't it strange for God to declare humanity's right to do what it appears people like Abel were already doing without any negative judgments from God? End quote. So, Genesis 9 is written as it is because it's following a classic Hebraic formula for introducing prohibitive legislation in which an entire class of animals is designated as proper for food or as improper, with the following restrictive clause providing the exceptions. See Van E., Death in the Garden, page 245. So over here, I've got a chart that I have taken from Ben Stanhope's Misinterpreting Genesis, where we have an allowance followed by a limiting prohibition. So in Genesis 9, chapter 9, verses 1 to 5, the allowance is, all moving which lives will be to you for food, like a green plant I give to you all. And the limiting prohibition is, only meat of which blood is in it you may not eat, and for your own lifeblood I will seek. In Leviticus chapter 11, verses 3 to 4, the allowance is, of all with a parted hoof and which chews the cud, among the animals you may eat. The limiting prohibition is, only these you shall not eat among those that only chew the cud. Leviticus 11, 20 to 21, allowance, these you may eat of all that are in the waters. Limiting prohibition, but all that lack fins and scales are a detestable thing to you. Leviticus 11, 9 to 10, limiting prohibition, all flying swarmers that go upon all fours shall be detestable to you. Allowance, only these you may eat of all flying swarmers. Deuteronomy 14:11, allowance, all clean birds you may eat. Prohibition, but these you may not eat. So Genesis chapter 9, verses 1 to 5, in parallel with other Hebrew prohibitive legislation formulas. Typically, although not always, such formulas include a thing already well recognized as permitted. for use or consumption before introducing a limited prohibition with an Hebrew symbol. So, no, God is not saying, okay, you were previously allowed to eat fruits and vegetables, but now I allow you to eat meat as well, as is commonly interpreted. Now, next question. Why did God need to set a rainbow as a reminder? He said, I'm going to set my rainbow in the clouds, and when I look at it, I'm going to remember my covenant with you. What does God have a poor memory? Does he forget things? Does he need to write things down? Well, as Reverend Mark Coons writes in his article here that I have hyperlinked to, quote, he writes, quote, the phrase, I have set my rainbow in the clouds, does not mean it was the first time rainbow colors could be seen as light refracting and dispersing through mists. Rather, God declared that every time humans see a rainbow, henceforth, they could be reassured that there would not be another flood of annihilating proportion. I would say basically this is an anthropomorphism. This is just, and someone asked a question about last week's live stream about God regretting that he had made mankind before he made the flood, and I said that this was an anthropomorphism. This was just a way of God saying, I am really, really sad and really, really upset with how humanity has turned out. Basically God was emoting. He was saying, I regret that I even made these filthy humans. You know, it would be like if you said to someone you were angry at, I regret that I've ever met you, or I wish you had never been born, or I wish I had never taken this lousy job. You may not actually mean that you wish you had not met that person or had taken that job, but it is a way of expressing how deeply dissatisfied you are with that person or your job. And that's the way I take that statement in Genesis 6, when God is looking at the depravity of mankind. He says, I regret that I've ever even made humans. They're just so awful. I wish I hadn't done that. You know, it's just, he doesn't really mean, hey, there was a lack of foresight here. I didn't know humans were going to turn out this bad. Now, open theists would argue that that's evidence that God did lack foresight. And I'm not gonna. This is a rabbit trail. I'm not gonna go off into that. But there's overwhelming evidence across both testaments that God does know the future. I mean, look at Psalm 139. Psalm 139, for example. When the psalmist says, "Hey, before a word is even on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely." So before the psalmist even speaks, God knows what he's going to say. The very concept of prophecy presupposes that God has foreknowledge. Open theism basically renders prophecy to just a series of extremely lucky guesses. It would make prophecy, predictive prophecy. Not all prophecy is future telling, of course, but it would make predictive prophecy tantamount to God saying, I don't know the future, so let me tell you the future. It just doesn't make any sense. So we need to interpret Scripture in light of Scripture, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time debunking open theism because that takes us way too far afield. But I take the statement in Genesis 6 that God regretted even making humankind as just an anthropomorphism. It's just God emoting. Basically just saying, man, I'm really, really upset with how humanity turned out. And so I take the whole, when I look at the rainbow, I'm going to remember my covenant with you. I take that in the same way. It's just that whenever God sees a rainbow, he's going to be like, yep, I made a covenant with humankind. to never destroy all of them again with floodwaters. Not that he would have been, oh, right. I was thinking about flooding mankind, but I just saw a rainbow today, and I remembered that many, many thousands of years ago, I promised this guy Noah that I wasn't going to do that. So, good thing I saw that rainbow. No, it's just an anthropomorphic way, Anyway, let's move on to Genesis chapter 9, verses 20 to 27. We read, quote, "The sons of Noah who went forth from the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the people of the whole earth were dispersed. Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk and lay uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and walked backward, and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned backwards, and they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his youngest son had done to him, he said, 'Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers.' He also said, 'Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant.' After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. All the days of Noah were 950 years, and then he died." So this is a weird passage. It's a weird passage. We read about the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and the author tells us that Ham was the father of Canaan, because he already knows what he's going to write and what he's going to communicate to you. He told you, so he makes that clear, that who Canaan's father is. He says these were the three sons of Noah, and then Noah gets drunk and he passes out in his tent, and Ham, he walks in, he sees the nakedness of his father, and he tells his two brothers outside. Shem and Japheth, they walk backwards, so they don't see anything, and they cover Noah up. And Noah wakes up, and he's really ticked off, and he says, "Cursed be Canaan." Well, for one thing, Canaan hasn't been born yet, and for another, why are you cursing your grandson? He didn't do anything. It was Ham's fault. But even then, why would you curse Ham for just because he happened to walk in and see your privates? I mean, isn't that a bit of an overreaction? What in the world is going on here? Well, there are four options that biblical scholars take. The first is what I've always taken it to be, that the sin of Ham was voyeurism. Ham walks in, sees Noah's privates, and he walks out, and Ham somehow realizes that, and he gets ticked off. The second is that Ham castrated Noah. That the whole seeing the nakedness is really just a euphemism for castration. The third option is Ham committed paternal incest. Option 4 is Ham committed maternal incest. So option 1, the sin of Ham was voyeurism. Option 2, Ham castrated Noah. Option 3, Ham committed paternal incest. Option 4, Ham committed maternal incest. Now, about options 2, 3, and 4, you may be thinking, where in the world would anybody get that idea? Well, we're going to see where they get these ideas as we look at the data. So first, let's look at these options in order. Voyeurism. John Sightsee Bergsma and Scott Walker Hahn have an article that's titled "Noah's Nakedness and the Curse on Canaan." It's from the Journal of Biblical Literature. On page 27, they write this, quote, "The strength of this position is its conservatism. It refuses to see anything in the text that is not explicit. Yet, in a sense, voyeurism is a non-explanation, since it fails to elucidate either the gravity of Ham's offense or the reason for the curse of Canaan. It also requires the interpreter to assume the existence of a taboo against the accidental sight of a naked parent that is otherwise unattested in biblical or ancient Near Eastern literature, end quote. Donald J. Wold, in his book Out of Order, Homosexuality in the Bible and the Ancient Near East, writes, quote, was there a custom that children did not even look into the tent of their parents? How could Ham have known that his father was naked when he opened the tent flap? Perhaps in his innocence, he only meant to speak with his father, or, more altruistically, perhaps he knew that his father had taken too much wine and needed assistance of some sort. Perhaps Ham saw his naked father and entertained lewd thoughts, i.e., lusted after him, but did nothing about it. If so, this incident would be one of the earliest examples where an individual is made liable to a curse or penalty for merely intending to do something. Scholars who accept the literal view maintain that Ham only saw his nude father, but they must defend a custom about which we know nothing. They must also presume an immoral intention based on the severity of the curse imposed by Noah. A further problem with this view is that it does not explain why the curse was pronounced on Ham's son Canaan and not on Ham himself, end quote. Pages 66 to 67. So Ham walked in, saw his dad Noah there naked unexpectedly, and that merits the cursing of his son Canaan. It just seems like an overreaction. On the Naked Bible podcast, in episode 159, Dr. Michael S. Heiser said, quote, again, we don't really have any evidence that it was taboo to just come upon someone's naked body and see them, and then you were in big trouble. There's nothing like that in biblical law or ancient Near Eastern law. Nevertheless, this has probably become the leading traditional view, and it really derives from the statement that Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father. That's really where it comes from. So simple voyeurism is probably the leading traditional view. Its primary weakness, other than not having a law or anything in the Bible that would just say this was awful, is that it really doesn't explain the curse on Canaan at all, end quote. So let's look at the second option. Did Ham castrate Noah? This interpretation says that the sin that Ham committed was basically removing Noah's testicles. Certainly, this is a rabbinic idea. To quote Bergsma and Hahn in their article, they provide just a little snippet, pun not intended, of an explanation or comment here. They say, quote, one can cite examples from ancient Near Eastern mythology, though none from the Bible, of a son castrating his father as part of an effort to usurp his authority. This view also provides some rationale, albeit complex, for the cursing of Canaan. Noah curses Ham's fourth son, since Ham deprived Noah of a fourth son. What is lacking, however, is any lexical hint in the text of Genesis chapter 9, verses 20 to 27 that would suggest castration, end quote. So basically what Bergsma and Hahn are saying is that there's no evidence in the text that castration occurred. There's no evidence that Noah desired to have a fourth son, but this view does have the advantage of explaining why Noah was so angry. Hey, if someone removed my testicles while I was passed out, I'd be pretty ticked off too. But other than providing a reason for Noah's outburst, it's really a strained interpretation. Let's look at the third option then, that Ham committed paternal incest. I think this view is the closest to the truth, as you'll see later, but it slightly misses the mark. Robert A.J. Gagnon takes this view in his book, The Bible and Homosexuality. In his book, The Bible and Homosexual Practice, Robert A.J. Gagnon writes, quote, first, the story appears to place Ham inside the tent, suggesting an action beyond peeking into the tent. Genesis 9:22 clearly states that after seeing his father's nakedness, Ham told it to his two brothers outside. The Septuagint is even more explicit, adding or translating from a different Hebrew version that Ham went out and told Exelphon. What was he doing inside the tent? Probably the tent was understood to be off limits to the sons, explaining why Shem and Japheth were outside and unaware. The fact that verse 23 refers to Shem and Japheth taking the outer garment suggests that the garment was Noah's. How did Noah's garment happen to be outside the tent? The most likely answer is Ham brought it out when he went back outside. Why would Ham have brought out Noah's garment? A possible answer: Ham brought the garment out as proof of what he had done to his father. It was the evidence he needed to establish bragging rights. Second, when Noah woke up, he learned what his youngest son had done to him. Not the expression one would expect to describe an unintended glance or even voyeurism. If Wetegal is translated "and he was uncovered" rather than "and he uncovered himself," it leaves the door open for asking who uncovered Noah. The continuation in 9:22, which need not be separated from 9:21 with a period, intimates that Ham committed the unspeakable act, end quote. This is from page 69 of The Bible and Homosexual Practice, Texts and Hermeneutics by Robert A.J. Gagnon. He goes on to say, quote, third and most important, the language of uncovering and seeing the nakedness of connects up with similar phrases denoting sexual intercourse. Leviticus uses the phrase "uncovered the nakedness of" to denote incest. Leviticus 18, 20, 11, verses 17 to 21. Also in 18:19, of sexual intercourse with a woman during her menstrual cycle. The same phrase is used elsewhere in the Bible of prostitution and adultery, and of rape and or public exposure for adultery. In Leviticus chapter 20, verse 17, the expression "sees his or her nakedness" is used to describe sibling incest. In other instances, the phrase "seeing the nakedness of" may imply an opportunity for rape. Thus, it is likely that the narrator charged Ham with committing a heinous act of incestuous homosexual rape of his father, end quote. So, did Ham commit paternal incest? I think that this is the closest alternative to being correct out of all of the alternatives that we have examined thus far. The reason I say that is that this interpretation recognizes that Ham did something to his father. The text says, quote, when Noah realized what his youngest son had done to him. Obviously, something more than mere taking a glimpse at daddy's ding-dong is going on here. An action took place. And as Gagnon explains, a plausible explanation is that Noah's garment was outside the tent, is that Ham took it out as evidence he needed to establish bragging rights over what he had done. Finally, Gagnon explains that the phrase "seeing the nakedness of" is a common Old Testament idiom for sexual intercourse. Here, I think Gagnon is correct. It was indeed an Old Testament idiom for sexual intercourse. However, I think Gagnon misapplies it. He gets so close, but he literally misses it by mere inches. And no, I didn't misuse the term literally here, and you'll see why. Now, the view of this that I take is that Ham committed maternal incest. He committed an incestuous act with his mother, Noah's wife. On the episode 159 of the Naked Bible podcast, Dr. Michael S. Heiser says, quote, the key here is to understand that uncovering nakedness, which describes the act of removing clothing from the genital area for the purpose of sex, and seeing nakedness are equated in this passage. Did you notice that? We have the idiom to see the nakedness of and sees her nakedness, and that's parallel to uncovering nakedness. Similar expression, but with two different verbs, see and uncover. That's important because if you actually searched for the phrase uncovering nakedness, there the Hebrew word is galah. You're going to find passages that very clearly and explicitly show that uncovering nakedness is a reference to sexual intercourse, end quote. So in Leviticus chapter 8, verses 16 to 18, where a lot of these seeing the nakedness idioms are found, we read, "None of you shall approach any one of his close relatives to uncovered nakedness. I am the Lord. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father, which is the nakedness of your mother. She is your mother. You shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife. It is your father's nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your sister, your father's daughter, or your mother's daughter, whether brought up in the family or in another home. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your son's daughter or of your daughter's daughter, for their nakedness is your own nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife's daughter, brought up in your father's family, since she is your sister. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's sister. She is your father's relative. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister, for she is your mother's relative. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's brother. That is, you shall not approach his wife. She is your aunt. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your daughter-in-law. She is your son's wife. You shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your brother's wife. It is your brother's nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of a woman and her daughter, and so on. So in God's eyes, incest is not wincest. What we see here is, look, you shall not uncover the nakedness of your father. And it says that, what is the nakedness of your father? It's the nakedness of your mother. She is your mother. You shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's. The nakedness of your father's wife is your father's nakedness. The nakedness of your father's brother. The nakedness of your father's brother is her, your aunt's nakedness. Dr. Michael S. Heiser, in his episode 159, Noah's nakedness, the sin of Ham, and the curse of Canaan, he says, quote, "In Old Testament Semitic patriarchal culture, the nakedness of a man was defined as the woman that belongs to him." So that's why Leviticus has this wording. To us, it sounds very confusing, but if you understand the idiom, it's not, end quote. At this point, one may wonder about the description of Shem and Japheth walking in backwards so as not to see Noah's nakedness. Surely the text isn't saying that they were trying to avoid having sex with their mother, right? Bergman Hahn explained that, quote, "The brothers' actions play on the broader meaning the brothers' actions play on the broader meaning of the phrase. Not only did the brothers not see their father's nakedness in the sense of having intercourse with him, but they also did not even dare to see their father's nakedness in a literal sense. Where Ham's acts were exceedingly evil, their gesture was exceedingly pious and noble," end quote. In his book, When Giants Were Upon the Earth, The Watchers, the Nephilim, and the Biblical Cosmic War of the Seed, Brian Godawa writes, quote, Ham is oddly and repeatedly referred to as the father of Canaan. It is a strange repetition that draws attention to itself and is finally climaxed with Canaan being cursed instead of Ham for Ham's dirty deed. Well, if Canaan was the fruit of that illicit union of maternal incest between Ham and Emzara, it makes perfect sense within that culture that he is cursed. It may not sound kind to our modern ears, but it is perfectly consistent with that biblical time period. Ham sought to usurp his father's patriarchal authority through maternal incest, which was uncovering his nakedness. The fruit of that action, the son Canaan, is a cursed man, and that cursed man is the forefather of a cursed nation. End quote. So, in conclusion, the sin of Ham was maternal incest. Ham had sex with his mother, Noah's wife, in order to usurp his father's patriarchal authority. Rather than outright say that Ham violated his mother, the author of Genesis employed a biblical idiom, uncovered his father's nakedness, which meant to have sex with his father's wife. To uncover a man's nakedness was to have sex with a woman that belonged to him. This explains why Noah was so enraged at him, and why Canaan was cursed, because he was the fruit of that illicit union. It explains the done to him language we find in the account, which suggests Ham did more than just get a quick peek. So I find the maternal incest explanation has superior explanatory power and explanatory scope than paternal incest, or the hypothesis that Ham castrated Noah, or that the sin of Ham was just voyeurism. Okay, that's the end of this presentation. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments if you haven't already, and I will answer them. We got done a little bit early this time. Usually I go overtime, at least by about 10 minutes, and sometimes, unfortunately, by 30 minutes, by half an hour, like in the case of the Genesis 1 presentation and in the Nephilim presentation, where I just went on for an hour and 30 minutes. So we've got extra time for a Q&A. So whatever you want to ask, just put it in the live chat. I'll show it up here on the screen, and I'll respond to it to the best of my ability. I wonder if that thunder got picked up on the stream. And again, yeah, I mean, we got a thunderstorm coming up. So if I go black, you'll know why. So, but we got done with the presentation part at least. So that's good. Thank you, Jesus says, your videos are very interesting. Thank you. Thank you. Travis Lee says, yo. Hello. Good to have you with us, Travis. Andrew Risk says, nothing than what I emailed you this morning. Oh, I don't think I checked my email today. So I haven't gotten it, but I will get to your email and see what you had to ask. Yeah, today was a weird day. I really felt bad all day. Just no energy. And I had a terrible migraine. Thankfully I'm better now. I got better just in time to do the live stream. So I was kind of in a funk. Usually I remember to check my email either in the morning or late in the afternoon, but I just didn't today. Today was an odd day. So yeah, I'll get to it tomorrow, and see what you have to say. And for those who don't know, I have on my website, cerebralfaith.net, I have a questionnaire. I have where you can send me questions, and I will respond to it in a blog post, kind of like William Lane Craig does in his question of the week. So today, this one went up on the website. This is from a woman named Angie who asked about some textual variants. And so you see the question here. It's this is what I was emailed, and here's my response. And I give this one's not a very long one. Some of them are lengthy, some of them are not. It just depends on how much I need to say. And then you have here where you can send the email is cerebralfaith@gmail.com. So, and it can be about anything apologetics or theology related. It could be about, arguments for the existence of God, the resurrection, the minimal facts argument, the reliability of the New Testament, the doctrine of the Trinity, the problem of evil, just anything Bible related, anything Christianity related, apologetics related. And that's really what most of the blog consists of nowadays, because I pour most of my energy into my YouTube channel and my podcast, and the blog is really devoted to two things now: Q&As and book reviews. So here's I think this one might have been, this one was also from Andro, and I think it was the first one I ever got. So you can see, oh well, that was an oversight. It says add your heading text here. So as you can see, it's very much like William Lane Craig's question of the week. Big difference is that since I'm not the number one the most influential Christian philosopher in the world, I will most likely be able to respond to every question that I get. I'm not that popular yet. So that's what Andrew is talking about. I just thought I would plug that in case any of you may have questions not related to tonight's subject that you wanted to ask me and have answered. Andrew says, yes, that was the first question I asked him. So yeah, so by the way, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. I forgot to say that, I think, before I started. I've got to remember to start saying that in all of my YouTube videos, because that's just what you do when you're a YouTuber. You say like the video and subscribe. And if I get into a habit of it, if I do it for like 21 videos straight, I'll be able to remember. So, by the way, I have an audio podcast. I just released episode 110, The Father, Son, and Spirit in Romans 8 with Ron C. Fay. We talked about his book. And here on the podcast, you can download them to your MP3 player, although I don't really know anyone who uses an MP3 player anymore. I think smartphones pretty much serve that purpose, just like they serve so many other purposes. It's like a sci-fi futuristic Swiss Army knife. But if you wanted to download the episodes for whatever reason, there is an option here. Download, right there, right from the website, and also you can download them on Podbean. But I think most people would just stream it from here or Stitcher, Podbean, iTunes, wherever they listen to it. This is not the mid-2000s anymore. If you use an MP3 player, tell me in the chat, because I don't know anybody who does anymore. I don't. I just use my phone to listen to music and podcasts. I'll wait like a couple more minutes, and if there aren't any questions, then I'll cut the stream off. But we got plenty of time. Well, I think I think we're not going to get any question this time around, and so I think I'm just going to cut it off. I'll wait a little while longer just to see if something pops up. But anyway, while I'm waiting, tomorrow is going to be the final installment of the Primeval History series. We're going to cover both Genesis 10 and 11. We're going to be talking about the Tower of Babel, what it was, why the people wanted to build it. Most of what you're told in church, from the pulpit in Sunday school, is that people tried to build the tower to heaven because they were prideful. They wanted to make their way up to God, maybe to usurp him, or maybe to just, as the text says, make a name for themselves. And God didn't like that because he doesn't like pride. And so he confused the languages, and that was it. Well, he did confuse the languages, and they were trying to make a name for themselves, and they did build a tower, but there's a whole lot more to the story than that. There's a whole supernatural worldview that is going on, and if you're familiar with any of my podcast episodes on this, or if you're familiar with Michael Heiser's work, if you've read The Unseen Realm or his Demons book, you'll already know where I'm going to go with that. It's called the Deuteronomy 32 Worldview. We're going to be talking about that next week. I'm really excited for it. That's a fascinating topic. So it's going to be tomorrow. No, not tomorrow. Next week. It's going to be next week, not tomorrow. It's going to be next Monday, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be talking about Genesis 10 and 11. We're going to be talking about the Tower of Babel and the fall of the gods. So it doesn't look like we're going to get any questions. I don't think anybody watching has any. So I'm just going to say thank you for watching Cerebral Faith Live. Again, come back next week, and we're going to finish off the Primeval History, and after that, we're going to look at Christology. We're going to look at the deity of Christ. Does the Bible teach it? We're going to look at the logical coherence of the incarnation. We're going to look at the doctrine of the Trinity. I'm probably going to cover that over the course of 4 live streams. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you for watching Cerebral Faith Live. Peace out. God bless, and keep using the brains that God gave you.